Inside Out 2 is actually pretty good. This movie takes place, I guess, about 5 years after the first one, where Riley, the kid who all these emotions are living inside of, is now just reaching puberty, and the story takes place over the course of 3 days while she's at this like hockey camp. She finds out that her friends who she thought she was going to be going to high school with are actually not going to the same school as her, and so she's sort of having to deal with like a lot of change both inside her and also like going on around her. And then the story looks primarily at like how anxiety is sort of threatening to change everything about who she is as a person, and sort of how she's going to overcome that anxiety and remain true to who she is. At the very beginning of this movie, they're like, oh yeah, there's this thing called the sense of self, which is composed of beliefs, which are composed of memories. And it's like, I think that's a really cool way to depict something like that. I just wish that it had been introduced in a more natural way, because the first 10 minutes of this movie is literally just Joy telling you everything you're gonna need to know for the rest of the movie, and it is a little bit clumsy. I do wish this movie had taken place over a longer period of time, because like I said, the story takes place over the course of 3 days. If you're going to tell a story about how anxiety can sort of reshape your entire sense of self, I feel like you have to do it over a longer period of time if you want it to be emotionally impactful in any meaningful way. Anxiety's plan in this movie is to essentially take that sense of self and reshape it using memories stemming from like anxious moments, basically. And it's sort of a very interesting concept about like letting your insecurities and your fears define you. I just think that it would have been cooler if it happened more gradually instead of something that happened all at once and then got undone all at once. Basically, I just feel like if you're gonna tell a story about anxiety or puberty or whatever, you have the opportunity to tell a story that's set over like a decade instead of 3 days, and that might have actually made some of the more emotional moments in this movie feel a little bit more impactful, because at the beginning of this movie, Riley is this person who sort of knows what she's about. She has this sense of self, and then over the course of one hockey camp, her sense of self becomes completely eroded and then completely restored again. And it's not like the movie puts her right back at square one at the end of this movie. Like, she has grown a little bit as a character. I just think it could have been more impactful given a sort of a longer exposure to the character. Sort of a really nitpicky critique of a children's movie, and I don't mean to suggest that this movie was bad in any way. It was actually really funny. I have to admit, I was a little bit like apprehensive when I heard that they were gonna make a sequel to Inside Out, because everything's getting a sequel now, and most of these sequels, there's just no story there. But unlike, say, Cars, there actually was another story to tell in this universe that was good and interesting. Like, I don't know how I didn't see it, but yeah, if the first movie is going to be about an 8-year-old and the thoughts going on in her head, puberty and becoming an adult is going to have a big impact on her, and there's a good story there. So I don't know why I didn't think this would be good. It actually was. I would say in the Pixar tier list, there are like 4 tiers. I would put Inside Out 2 in like the second highest tier. It was quality. Overall, a cute and funny and entertaining movie that could have been a little bit more interesting if they had been willing to write it in sort of a more challenging way. 6.5 out of 10. Night Shift was so incredibly dumb. This movie has been getting pretty good reviews, which is why I went to go see it, because it's like a lower budget horror movie, but people have been saying good things about it, so I was like, sure, why not? And I don't understand the love for this movie. Plot-wise, this movie is about a lady who moves to like a small town and takes a job as the night shift worker at a motel. And it's pretty clear from the start that this hotel is probably very haunted. Like, when she asks the guy who owns it, is this place haunted? He's like, I don't know, which is usually not the response that someone gives if their establishment is not haunted. And like, as she starts working there, she starts seeing ghosts and all sorts of spooky supernatural apparitions in these various motel rooms, and it's like, this place is definitely haunted. And then there's an added wrinkle. It turns out that when she was younger, a serial killer named Walton Gray, they give his first and last name. Every character in this movie is actually introduced by their first and last name. Walton Gray killed her entire family when she was younger, but left her alive. And now Walton Gray is back on the prowl looking for her, so she's worried that he's gonna come and finish the job, so to speak. So it's kind of like they mixed 2 horror movie things together. They got the scary ghost hotel and the serial killer stalking the little, I was about to say the little girl, but this woman is probably 35. So she's working this night shift and like all sorts of weird random shit is happening. Like at one point these 2 like like wealthy socialite characters come to the motel after a big art exhibition and they're being like total assholes. I don't even know like what the point of these characters are, but they're like cartoon rich people basically. They're like, oh, I can't believe common folk actually sleep in a place like this. We're rich and we're just here to bone. And so then the guy gets like really mad when the lady tells him that it's like $91 a night for a room, and he just starts throwing $100 bills at her, like 7 or 8 of them, and then they go off to bone down, and then the lady, Gwen, have I mentioned that the main character's name is Gwen? I don't think I ever said that, but she's Gwen. Gwen like walks out to their room where she knows that they are having sex and just peeps in through the window and then is like surprised to find that they're having sex. And you're like, huh, what an interesting subplot that is. I wonder how that's gonna come back and play into the whole supernatural happenings of it all. Yeah, it doesn't. That never goes anywhere. They just put that in for some reason. That is only one of the very strange decisions that Gwen makes. Gwen is constantly acting in ways that just kind of defy common sense, and it makes her a really hard protagonist to root for. Like at one point she gets like a haunted phone call from one of the empty motel rooms and she like fucking goes to investigate it. If I was working the night shift at a hotel and I got a haunted phone call where a ghost giggled at me, I would probably just quit my job right then and there. I definitely would not go, better go to the room where this happened and just check it out for myself. And this happens constantly. Like there are several points in this movie where Gwen sees a ghost with her own fucking eyes, like walk into a room and she's like, oh, I'm gonna go in there and check that out. Anyways, the twist near the end of this movie is that there actually was no ghost and there actually was no serial killer. Gwen's just crazy. Turns out that she was actually the one who killed her entire family, and that's why she's been seeing ghosts. The ghosts are like the guilt hallucinations that she's seeing of her family who she killed, and she just invented the serial killer in her mind to like, I guess, because she's crazy. Okay, I'm complaining a lot about this movie, but the truth is, I feel like this could have been a good movie. There's no reason this had to be bad. Haunted hotel, that's like a perfect setting for a horror movie. I worked for a couple months at a hotel, like on the night shift, working the front desk, and the ambiance of a hotel at like 3 in the morning when no one else is there and like half the lights are off and you're just walking down these like long empty hallways, it was creepy in like the best way. Very liminal space sort of environment, and I feel like that's the movie I wanted to see. It was more disappointing than anything because I just feel like you could have made a really good horror movie about that, but they didn't. It also wasn't totally irredeemable. I would say there were a couple shots and a few scares that really worked, one of which has kind of stuck with me even for like the last day since I saw the movie. So Gwen is in one of the haunted cabins, having investigated the haunted phone call, and she's on the phone. The camera is like tightly focused on her, and the rest of the background of the room that she's in is kind of a dark blur, and something sits up in the bed behind her very slowly, but because it's so focused on her, you don't really see any details of it, you just see the movement, and it happens very slowly with no jump scare sound. That really fucking worked. That got me. I was freaked out. Like, this movie was unsettling at times and had some interesting ideas, it just really had no idea how to capitalize on them. 2 out of 10. Firebrand was really interesting. I feel like the cultural perception of Henry VIII is almost like comical. Like, haha, he had 6 wives. And this movie is like, no, he was actually terrifying. I had no historical knowledge of the time period that this movie took place in, so I didn't know anything about like the religious schisms that were happening at the time and like the conflict between Henry and the people that he was actually like lording over, who had completely different ideas of how they wanted their religion to work than he did, and how he would basically brand anyone a heretic who disagreed with him like in any way at all. And how Catherine, the main character of this movie, had a lot of beliefs and was very vocal about beliefs that were really in opposition to what Henry thought and what he enforced. So I found this movie very interesting because it gave a lot of historical background and knowledge, and the acting was just phenomenal. I mean, Jude Law, who played Henry VIII, was insane. He gave off this like really unstable, unpredictable, paranoid sort of a vibe, just terrifying to watch. And Alicia Vikander, who played Catherine, was like amazing also. I do think this movie was a little boring and very slow. It was 2 hours long, and I think that was a little bit longer than the movie had a story to tell. Catherine was just a fascinating character, like the 6th person to marry this absolutely unstable, tyrannical guy. and just scheming and clawing behind his back to try to stay alive, and not just stay alive, but like actually accomplish things in that society that nobody else could get done at the time because nobody else had the king's ear like she did. It was really interesting to see her relationship with Henry's other kids because at that point she didn't really have any kids of her own, and she was in a lot of ways like the only mother that some of these kids really knew, and so the relationship between her and those kids was really interesting. There was also sort of like a love story about somebody that she was in love with behind Henry's back. There was a lot of like period drama intrigue to it. It was interesting, but to me, I guess, a little bit forgettable, and I'm glad I saw it, and the acting was phenomenal, but I can't say I loved it. It was kind of just, eh. I would say like 5 out of 10. Okay, those were all the movies I saw this week. Next week, I'm thinking The Bikeriders, which, I mean, I'll go see anything with Tom Hardy in it, and that looks like it's gonna be good. The Exorcism, starring Russell Crowe, I think that's probably gonna be really bad. And Thelma, which seems to be some sort of like an action comedy about an old lady trying to get revenge, should be interesting at least. I really don't know what to think about that one. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.